Mr. M.S. Mani, Senior Director with Deloitte India. Everything you wanted to know about the GST, how it will work. Now, of course, that the Chief Economic Advisor has recommended specific rates as well, 3 rates. The government has allotted 4 hours of discussion time in the Rajya Sabha. It's moving forward, really. So let's just understand what has been recommended, which is the latest, and how it will change everyone's lives. Mr. Mani, thank you very much, sir. Good morning. Good to have you here. First, your thoughts on the rates which have been proposed. What's your view? Are the rates reasonable? Are the rates broadly in line with what you were expecting? And just also tell us each of the 3 rates and what they will do.
Okay. I guess the first thing we need to keep in mind is that the 3 rates which have been recommended. One is a merit rate, which is on the lower side. The other is a standard rate, and the third is a rate which is applicable on sin goods, so to say. So the merit rate, which is basically the rate which will get applied to essential commodities and articles which are used by the common man, so to say, has been kept at a low level. So they are discussing a rate of anywhere between 10% and 12%. Now, when it comes to the standard rate, and the standard rate is very important because that is the rate that will be applicable to the largest number of goods and services. So I would say maybe 70-80% of the items would be covered by the standard rate. Now that is proposed at 17 or 18%. And the demerit rate which has been proposed, which would largely be applicable to, I would say, sin goods, maybe items such as tobacco products and possibly luxury cars, and maybe a few other items that the government may want to, put in that category. That's at 40%. Now, here again, we need to bear in mind that alcoholic beverages are outside the purview of GST itself, and therefore the 40% doesn't apply to alcoholic beverages at all. Now, when you have 3 rates of this kind, typically the government also works out a weighted average rate, so to say, in terms of what is the weighted average rate at which the existing tax revenues are kept at a similar level under the GST regime.
How much taxes you need to collect to replace what you're collecting now, right?
Exactly. Now, that is termed as a revenue neutral rate. Now, the revenue neutral rate, which the Chief Economic Advisor mentioned on Friday, was 15.5%. So, he said an RNR of 15.5%. But as I said, the RNR of 15.5% is more in terms of having a fix on what is the weighted average rate. It's not actually a rate which will apply to any category of commodities. So those will be at a merit rate, a standard rate, or at a rate kept for sin goods.
Yeah, fair enough. Just a quick point, when you said 70 to 80% of the items will be covered by the standard rate, you meant by value? Or you meant products essentially?
Products. Not necessarily by value, because there would be a big difference in terms of value. So I mean, if someone calculates the value of, let's say, 500 luxury cars, to get an equivalent value of soap and shampoo, you would need to sell something like 5 million pieces. So this is more by the number of products in terms of impact, in terms of what people use. Product categories.
Product categories.
That's right.
Okay. One thing which we've been kind of talking about from the morning is this entire tax on tobacco, which is 40%, right?
That's right.
GST.
That's right.
40%.
That's right.
Is the 40% going to subsume excise, VAT, everything in it, or does this replace the VAT and excise is separate?
No, the 40% does subsume both the excise and the VAT. What it may not subsume is if there are any local taxes on tobacco which are not part of the GST ambit.
Okay.
Because GST, in terms of both the CGST and SGST, is in respect of identified taxes which are mentioned in the Constitution Amendment Bill. It's not for each and every tax. So if there are, and this should cover most of the taxes, but if there are a few taxes which are not subsumed by the GST, those additional taxes
which
may be
individual states or local bodies
exactly.
And there are those taxes as well.
Yeah, those taxes to a large extent have been subsumed, but some taxes may still remain.
The thing is, the ITC, which is the largest player in that segment,
right,
pays about, its blended rate is about 64% or so, tax rate. So that moves down to 40%. That's what we're saying here?
Quite possible. I mean, we need to just get into, what that 60% comprises of. And if that 60% largely comprises of excise plus VAT, it will certainly go down.
Okay. You're sure about this? Because,
Yeah, very much.
To me, it kind of didn't sit well because that the government would actually, if it's 40 from compared to 60, it's foregoing a large revenue, right? Large amount of revenue.
Yeah, but see, what we have to bear in mind is that the GST legislation, in terms of the Constitution Amendment, bill, has proposed to subsume excise duty as well as VAT. So if excise duty and VAT, add up to 60, now the replacement is going to be 40. What we will have to wait and watch possibly is, does the government come out with any other additional tax or cess on tobacco alone?
Okay.
So 40% may be the demerit rate, and there could be an add-on in terms of items which are relating to tobacco. Because again, I mean, you must be aware that in respect of tobacco as well, the rates of excise duty are dependent on the length of the cigarette.
Yes.
So it's length based.
Yes.
So 40% is a standard rate that they have said.
For the category.
For the category, exactly. So they might come with specific rates which are for each length.
But that would obviously come out separately as part of the budget or something, or maybe it could happen together with this.
It could happen as part of the GST legislation, because once the GST Council is formed, they will come out with the GST legislation. And when they come out with the GST legislation, they might come out with some additional taxes as well.
Okay. Now, when the detail of this entire thing comes out, the recommendations itself, because what are the things that you still want clarity on, Mr. Mani?
Okay. See, at a broad level, the government has been pretty transparent, and I would say more so in the last couple of months or so, because they have put together the business process documents on public domain.
Okay.
So the business process relating to registration, relating to refunds, relating to tax payments, and relating to returns. Now, all of these have been put in public domain.
Okay.
Now, on the basis of the business processes which were put in the public domain, industry has made a large number of representations to it.
Okay.
And there are quite a few concerns which trade and industry have, which is very, very genuine. Now, what we would expect is that when the draft legislation is published, it should take into account the legitimate concerns that trade and industry have.
Okay.
Because taking care of the legitimate concerns is very important, because that will make the GST legislation an enabler to business development. It should not become a showstopper for any particular business. And that can only happen if we reduce the compliance burden on legal entities.
Is it becoming a showstopper in its current form?
No, it's not becoming a showstopper, but some of the provisions which have been put in the business process documents seem to make it very, very onerous. For instance, it is mandatory for service providers to obtain a registration in each state that they operate in.
Okay.
Now, that's not required at present. So, at present, most of the service providers, such as large banks, for instance, they obtain a centralized registration in whichever state, they are registered or they are headquartered. And they run their business operations throughout the country and pay the tax at the end of the month. Now, the business process document on registration did make a mention that it is necessary to obtain a state-wise registration even for service providers.
Okay.
Now, this will make it very, very onerous.
But is there any justification for this?
No, the justification which is there, which they have mentioned in the document, is that under GST, there is a necessity for service providers also to make a local tax payment, which is the SGST component.
Okay.
So, unless there is an SGST payment in each state that they operate in, how do they track in terms of which state gets what?
Okay.
So that seems to be the thinking behind it.
Okay.
But the thought process should not be accompanied by more of compliance. It has to be achieved in a manner because we live in a technology-oriented world.
Right.
So I'm sure all of these things can be done in a much more simpler manner.
So this is one, but if you take the entire proposals as an aggregate, would you say it makes things easier, or it makes it more onerous?
I would say largely it makes things easier because there is a large amount of focus in terms of using technology.
Okay.
So the tax payments, the tax returns, the matching of the credits, everything will be electronic and everything will be technology assisted. So assuming the technology works well, it should make life simpler. And there are some occasional glitches that they need to take care. One of them I mentioned. So similar issues such as this, if they take care, it will certainly work very, very well.
Okay. Mr. Mani, just to go back at the broader picture of the impact of the GST, there were these various reports which were put out, right? The GST will add this percentage to GDP and this and that and all of that. Now, some have come back and said that, well, if you keep property, alcohol, etc. out of the ambit of the GST, all those the numbers then don't add up, I mean, actually at all. Do you have any thoughts on that, on this subject? This boost to the economy in terms of GDP that the legislation is supposed to, expected to provide?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident it will certainly give a boost to the economy. I'm not able to put a figure on whether it is 1, 1.5, 2, or whatever be the number, because no one has come out with a calculation in terms of how these figures were arrived at. I'm very confident that GST will certainly give a boost to the numbers of the economy, because it's going to make things a lot simpler, and it's going to add a large number of efficiency in business. So, let me give you an example to illustrate it. And, I mean, this is very simple to understand. See, at a broad level, if today you think of movement of goods from the place where the goods are manufactured to the place where the goods are consumed. Now, the goods are manufactured in various states, and the goods are consumed in various states as well. Now, if you have a manufacturer who's located in the northern part of the country, let us say Punjab, and the manufacturer of these goods has got his customers who are located in one of the southern states, let's say Kerala. Now, moving the goods from Punjab to Kerala today takes around 22 days by a truck.
Okay.
Now, very large number of people have done surveys on this to find out as to how long does it actually take. And they have come out with a conclusion that if we abolish the central sales tax, and if we abolish the entry points and check posts in various states that the truck has to pass through, the 20 odd days can be cut down to 11 days.
Okay.
So if you have a 9 days saving in movement of goods from the northern part of the country to the southern part of the country, and you apply this all over, at a very simple level, you can see how people will benefit in terms of logistic cost. Right. The same truck can now make 3 trips instead of 1.5 trips. That is going to bring down the truck fares. Yeah. Now, it is going to lead a large amount of efficiency, because today the consumer in Kerala, or let us say the buyer in Kerala, needs to maintain 20 days inventory. Now we'll need to maintain just 10 days inventory. Now, when you add all of these up, what you realize is that GST is actually going to lead to a large amount of business efficiency. People will need to keep lesser inventory. Movement of goods will become cheaper. Many of the impediments to movement of goods within the country will go down. The role that check posts and waybills and entry posts play in the country today, that will significantly, reduce. And that is what is expected to improve business, like anything.
Fair enough. Mr. Mani, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for explaining all of these things very, very simply to us and our viewers. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.